Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob, and today we'll be jumping into some more malicious compliance. Now, I know we've had a lot of malicious compliance stories recently, but that's because that's all that's being posted on Reddit these days. So if you guys can suggest some other subreddits we could jump into, I'd love to hear it. Comment down below. Our first story today comes to us from Tato Sandwich. A manager told me not to do part of my job, so I didn't. Let's jump right in. This was a few years ago when I worked in a 4-star hotel chain that would be very well known and was part of a larger company that had hotels of varying status. I was about 24. There were a few of us who worked primarily in room service, and the breakfast shift was always a solo shift. One morning I started, and as was customary, I started doing my prep, folding napkins, setting up 5 or 6 trays with pastries, etc. per the pre-ordered breakfast cards, so I would only need to grab the correct tea and coffee and hot food later, as well as a few extra all-purpose trays for the people who call for room service last minute. I just get finished with this when the duty manager, I can't remember his full name but nickname was Prem, bursts into the kitchen with a dirty plate in his hand and sees me in my area while putting it in the pile of dishes for the kitchen porter. He tells across the kitchen, "What are you doing? It's so crazy out there that I have to help clear tables, and you are back here? Get out and help." I replied that I had not gone up and walked the halls to collect the trays left out overnight yet, and he yelled some more and repeated that if he, a manager, is clearing tables, I better help regardless of if my job is actually in a different area. For the record, Prem was a menace. I witnessed him yell at college girls' faces until they cried several times. He would also routinely pick on anyone that was minimum wage floor staff. So I walk into the restaurant and the supervisor, Jen, is at the door and sees me walk in. She covers for room service and has worked it in the past, so she knows I should be collecting trays now, so that place doesn't look like a war zone upstairs. She asks if I've done this and I say no. Prem sent me in to help because it's so busy. She says it's not very busy at all, they don't need me, and I should go upstairs and collect the dirty trays. I walk back into the kitchen and Prem is still standing there. "What are you doing? I told you to go and help." I went in and Jen said they don't need me and told me to collect the trays. He then accuses me of going to her and asking can I go collect trays to get out of helping, so I tell him he can go in and ask her if she called me or if I approached her. This satisfies him that I'm at least not lying, but he's still not happy. He says, "I'm the duty manager. Jen is a supervisor. I'm higher up, so you do what I tell you. Go in there and help clear tables. I don't want to see you going up to collect trays." I go back into the restaurant and Jen looks at me confused. I tell her that Prem insists that I help and won't let me go upstairs and says he outranks her, so she says I should join the guys at Station 1 and help their area. Breakfast passes and I pop out a few times to do my room services and come back with not much issue. My shift is until 3 p.m. and breakfast ended at 10:30 a.m. At this point, nobody has been upstairs and housekeeping will have been putting out dirty trays. I get a call on the room service mobile from a housekeeping manager saying that floor 4 has a dozen or so trays in the hall. I'm sorry, the duty manager has prioritized other areas at the moment and has said I cannot go up. I start doing my afternoon prep, polishing cutlery and the like. About 12 p.m. I get another call, this time from the housekeeping's top manager. She tells me there's trays everywhere, and I politely apologize and explain that my duty manager has used the exact words, "I don't want to see you going up to collect trays." She accepts this without question and asks that I help when I can. At 2 p.m. I get a call from the hotel's director of operations regarding the trays. At this point, there are trays in the hallways on all 7 floors, and the place looks filthy. Again, I politely explain what instructions I've received from Prem, and this is accepted without further question, and he says he will inquire into it. 3 p.m. arrives and I have not heard anything else, nor have I cleaned up the pigsty upstairs. My replacement arrives and I tell him what happened and apologize for the fact that he will have to collect these, but tell him why. He laughs and decides to leave it until somebody else calls and informs him they are there. Shortly after this, Prem left the company. Ah yes, another case of a manager who shouldn't be a manager because they're too stupid to do the job in the first place. It makes you wonder how they got that position. Do me a quick favor, have a look down below the video. If that subscribe button's still red, it means you're not actually subscribed to the KCC channel. Please hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories. Our second story today comes to us from SD Beer Guy. I can't drive anywhere without permission? Okay, I'll follow that rule maliciously. Let's jump right in. This happened when I was 16 years old and just got my driver's license. My parents had me run to the store to pick up some groceries. I stopped by my friend's house on the way back home for maybe 5 minutes to show him I got my license, and I was out driving alone. It was a really fun moment in the life of a 16-year-old. My stepmom, Marianne, freaked out. "We did not give you permission to drive to Bill's house. We told you to go to the store and that is all." I told Marianne and my dad that they had let me drive to Matt's house the day before, so I didn't think it was a big deal. They went unreasonable and laid down the unbendable rule that set up the malicious compliance. You are not allowed to drive anywhere we do not give explicit permission for you to drive. Period. End of sentence. Just because you were allowed to do it previously does not ever give you permission another time. Ever. Fast forward 3 days later, my 13-year-old stepsister has been a jerk to me all day, and I'm sick of her BS. She goes quiet for about 30 minutes and then comes out all sticky sweet. "Hey Brian, it's time to take me to ballet." I've taken her to ballet 3 days a week since I got my license. It's basically one of my chores. But I see my opportunity to say screw you to all 3 of them at once. "Sorry Tina, I'm not allowed to take you to ballet. The parents didn't tell me to take you, and I don't want to get in trouble." She screams, she cries, she begs, she threatens. She calls her mom and leaves a message. She calls my dad and leaves a message. Just like Steve Miller says, time keeps on slipping into the future. I'm not sure I'm brave enough to hang on to the bitter end and actually go through with it. I'm shaking, but I know I've got them dead to rights. No call back from the parents, and the clock goes on past the start of her class. Stepmom comes home and Tina runs to meet her. "Tina, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be at ballet." I hear Tina tell her rendition of the story, leaving out how miserable she had been, and they go back and forth. Marianne comes pounding down the hall and yells, "As God is my witness, you just wait till your father gets home." I had to stifle a laugh because I never really believed people actually said that. An hour later, Dad comes home and the 2 of them go running out to meet him and tell him how horrible I was. I wait in my room for the hammer to fall. About 10 minutes later, my dad calls down the hall, "Brian, would you please come here and talk to us?" "Well, Brian, you did it." "What do you mean, Dad?" "You got us all, and there's absolutely nothing we can do about it." "Okay, let's make this reasonable for everyone." And they did. They agreed that they were over the top. They recognized that Tina isn't always very nice to me, and they spoke to her about that. I was allowed to have reasonable freedom if I was driving somewhere, since I had good grades and had never been in trouble. I walked down the hall back to my room, my back to my parents, with the world's biggest grin on my face. Okay, first of all, good on Dad for realizing that he screwed up and owning up to it, but I can see this whole thing from both sides. I can understand the teenager wanting to go and brag about them having their license and being able to drive places and go and see their friends, but seeing it from the parent side and wanting to know where your kids are, especially when they're out in your car, they're a brand new driver, and they've told you they're only going to this place and back, it's only fair that the kid lets the parents know if that's gonna change. Our next story today comes to us from It's Fish 20. I can't leave at the end of my shift? Okay, I'll just call the cops for kidnapping a minor. Let's jump right in. So in high school 0206, I had a job at a Texas-style restaurant that may or may not be named after a famous Patrick Swayze movie. I was hired as a busboy and worked with one of my best friends. He had been there for about a year before I got hired and let me know which managers were cool and which sucked. Well, we had a Karen for a manager before Karen was a meme. She knew the busboys were high school kids and most had rides to work, but would make them stay late after they had already clocked out to clean stuff she saw that no one else would see, all while these kids' parents or whoever was picking them up were waiting in the parking lot. When an impatient parent would come in and complain to her about it being a school night, she would take revenge by not scheduling the kid for a week or so as punishment. When I was hired, it was for weed and beer money as I was 17 and had no other responsibilities outside school. I did not take the job serious at all. Well, one weekend, like 5 months into working there, I was asked to go to my best friend's lake house for the weekend, and since we were both working the same shift, we would just leave after we got off. Well, Karen decided that the night was slow and wanted all the busboys to deep clean everything around customers. Best friend and I were set to be off at 8 p.m. and we're planning on driving the 3 hours north to the lake house, so we were there as long as possible. Well, 7:45 hits and we are nowhere near done deep cleaning, and there were only 3 busboys on staff that night, so we go and tell Karen we're clocking out in 15 and that the deep clean probably won't be done tonight. Well, Karen does not like that and just says get back to work and she will let us know when we can leave. As a 17-year-old teen who was probably stoned at the time, I said, yeah, no, not doing that, and we're leaving at 8 and turned to walk out. She started yelling at me to turn around, that she was not done talking to me, and I was disrespecting her, and I just looked at her and said, it has been 5 minutes, we're now leaving in 10, and my best friend laughed and walked out with me. As we were finishing our last duty, she came storming out and blocked the clock out machine, said something that we cannot clock out, and we have to stay until she lets us go. I just looked at her, pulled out my Razr flip phone, and said I was calling the cops on her for kidnapping 2 minors, and she looked at me like I slapped her. The bar manager was right there and basically said she heard the whole thing and that she needed to let us leave as she was about to violate labor and child workplace law. Karen let out some guttural noise and went back to the office and slammed the door. Best friend thanked the cool bar manager and clocked out for the night and had a great weekend up north. We both ended up quitting that job about a month later when we were both punished for saying no to her and scheduled to work every night for a busy holiday weekend. We pulled the crap card as teens and just never showed up, but let our cool coworkers all know so they could cover the load. The best part about this story for me was that the bar manager had OP's back in this situation. I think they really served 2 purposes because they expertly de-escalated the situation, but they also stopped the cops from coming because that would have been a whole other basket of crazy. Our last story today comes to us from War Lover 1. Okay, I quit then. Let's jump right in. Reading some other high school and college jobs reminded me of this one. In high school, I got a part-time job at a food store we would call No Skills. At the time, minimum wage was $5.15 an hour, and they paid $9 an hour if you worked graveyards. That was killer money, so I worked graveyards Friday and Saturday nights during the school year. I got in at 8 p.m. and left about 7 in the morning. Black Friday was coming up in about a month, and my friends like to go out and shop around for fun. I requested to leave early at 10 a month in advance, which was approved by the cool manager I'll call Charlie. That night comes and the a-hole manager is working. We'll call him Dave. Dave decided to give a night off to 2 other employees, leaving us very short-staffed. I, of course, requested my time off a month ago, so whatever, not my issue. I get into work and let him know I am leaving at 10 just as a reminder. His response was, we'll see how far along we are by then and see. I didn't like how he phrased that, but I thought, whatever, I'm leaving either way. So it's about 9:50, I've been working my butt off stocking shelves to get as much done as possible and go to let him know I'm leaving. He stares at me and says we are too far behind and I can't leave and to come ask him at 11 instead. I tell him no, I have plans and took it off, so I'm heading out. He starts to grumble to himself, gives this little speech about how everyone else will have to stay super late if I go, yada yada. I say I'm still leaving. I took it off a month ago, so it was known well in advance. He stares at me and tells me if I leave I shouldn't bother coming back, and that I will be fired. High school me says that's not fair and whatnot, then he just says I can stay or lose my job. This job is just so I can have spending money, but he seems to think I'm like some other staff who actually need the job and can be bullied around. I just tell him, okay, I quit, and started to walk away. He tried to say something, but he just mumbled, as he had no idea what to say. He never expected me to actually leave. The next day, Charlie calls me up and apologizes for what happened, and asks if I really wanted to quit. I told him no and about what happened. He assured me Dave would leave me alone and had been talked to. I later found out he was also no longer allowed to approve time off anymore since he left the store so short-handed, and the morning crew actually has to help stock the shelves because it still wasn't done. Bonus story, I did stay working there and over the summer went full time. A buddy of mine was jealous of the money I made and also got a job there working graveyards with me. Part of the job is facing the aisles before leaving to make it all look pretty. The whole team would tackle the aisles together so we can talk while doing it. With my buddy being new, we played a little joke and told him that part of facing included shaking all the salad dressings as they would settle during the day. We left him to it and moved on, and about 2 aisles later we noticed he is still not with us, and Charlie, who would help us face when his duties were done, asked where he was. We told him the joke and we went back to check on him. To our amazement, he was with the dressings, shaking them, and had already shaken most of them already. We figured he was being a smart butt and was doing it so he didn't have to face, but when we told him it was a joke, he got pretty pissed off, which made it even funnier. I love how the manager complains about how everyone else will have to stay super late if he goes, because that scheduling problem was totally OP's fault. Just another manager trying to pass the buck. Check out all 4 OPs at the links in the description down below. Thanks for watching, have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.